This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
The truth is in here. This is our special Fight the Future Minute podcast. I'm Kurt North, and you are listening to our coverage of minute 84 of the X-Files Fight the Future. This minute begins at 83 minutes as the Well-Manicured Man reveals the real reason why he's telling Mulder everything, and ends at 83 minutes 59 as the Well-Manicured Man pulls a gun and Mulder reacts in fear as he tries to open the car door. To discuss this minute, I'm joined once again by X-Cast recurring guest, Darren Mooney. Darren, how are you doing today, mate?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I'm fearful of guns, so and how easy they're used. And I had so much suspense there.
Gun violence by middle-aged British men in fancy suits is a growing concern, I believe, in America today.
I can imagine it being, but also the fact that the fear factor, something that we discussed and we'll discuss shortly, about the fact that we are really scared that Mulder's going to die 84 minutes into a 2-hour film.
84 minutes into a 2-hour film, right after the Well-Manicured Man has gone out of his way to explain the intricacies of his evil plan. Which again, maybe again, this is the way the Syndicate works. Maybe it's like a Bond villain motif. Maybe it's like, oh, I'm just going to tell you because I feel like somebody should know before I shoot you. But again, like the fact that Mulder's been given the location of Scully, which again, even like ignoring, the Well-Manicured Man's motivations for giving him that information in terms of basic plot, the only reason that you give Mulder that information is so Mulder can use that information. And he's not going to use that information if you shoot him in the head. And similarly with the vaccine as well. He's not like, you don't give him the vaccine, shoot him in the head, and then have the Well-Manicured Man go, well, that was that then, I guess, and just sort of like go about his business anyway. That's just not how storytelling works. And again, you get the sense of the movie kind of pushing against that.
It seems that we mentioned this in an earlier minute about when we first start to get the driver and the driver's looking through, and it's that ominous, like suspenseful feeling that something is coming, and that's right at the very end of the minute, and obviously the next minute is interesting in itself. But let's go to the start then, just to start talking about in general about this minute in particular. We came off the back of this talking about the special edition minute, or the special edition
41
section,
seconds.
the extra 41 seconds. It should have been 42. If it was 42 seconds, it would have been perfect. Mulder's apartment's 42. It's the life, the universe, 42. Everything should have been 42. But I wanted to talk about, I kept this back from, I thought about asking this question at the very beginning when we saw Kurzweil put into the boot. But I thought it'd probably be a good chance to talk about it here with the comment that he says here where Mulder says, why are you telling me this? And Well-Manicured Man says, for the sake of my own children, once it's learned what I have told you, my life will be over. And then he looks at the driver ominously, which is a brilliantly played by John Neville. Yeah. I absolutely adore that. But Well-Manicured Man, we're seeing a different side to him. He's not been renowned for being an assassin. Cigarette Smoking Man is generally the person who deals with that, either by himself, his own hand, or by getting people like Krychek or whoever to do his bidding for him. We discussed it earlier that in our runs of minutes that we've done, so way back when we started looking at the glorious, sunshiny, happy, lucky-go life in Somerset, and he's now, killing people, putting them into the boot, and then his life as he knows it is over. So his arc is effectively finished here. So it makes sense that he would in some way look at getting a redemption arc in some ways and upset the insidious plans that he starts to talk about and enable Mulder to go on his quest with the MacGuffin that we've talked about with the vaccine. So what do you think to Well-Manicured Man? I mean, not only just in the film, but, Patient X and Red and Black retroactively puts in the virus and how he got hold of that virus. It doesn't really mention it in the film of where it's come from. But Well-Manicured Man redemption's arc here with earlier mentioned the children, and now he's saying for the sake of his own children. What do you make to that?
I think we kind of mentioned when we entered the Somerset episode that this is kind of a soft reboot of the Well-Manicured Man, because I think in Tunguska and Terma, it's implied that it's not necessarily all happy at home for him, and he's been having an affair with, I think, a veterinarian, it turns out, or it's implied in in Tunguska and Terma. So again, this is very much an example of kind of smoothing over a character in order to get kind of like the plot function that you need in the movie. And again, it's something that Neville plays remarkably well, because Neville is an actor who does, he can deliver all this exposition very well. He can deliver large blocks of kind of info dumps in ways that sound very compelling. And, you can see why the show kind of gravitated towards him. I think it used him very well, I think, back in, The Blessing Way and also in Paperclip for that function, and kind of stuck with it throughout as well. I think that what was interesting is that as the show developed and as it grew on, it understand that Neville was also very good at doing this kind of layered, kind of conflicted perspective, where he almost seemed above what he was doing, where he almost seemed a man who, was doing this thing but was not necessarily committed to this, where, he could embody that kind of, that fear that I think Bill Mulder talked about. I can't remember if it was in Anasazi or if it was in Endgame, but when he talks about the idea that, at a certain point you throw your lots in with these people and your politics become their politics, and you kind of you become tainted by association. And this kind of sense that he was, I think Kurzweil jokingly refers to himself and Bill Mulder as fellow travelers, kind of alluding to that kind of 1950s kind of HUAC sort of like communist sympathy kind of suggestion. But you have this idea of, that the Well-Manicured Man is something of a reluctant traveler along the way. And again, this sense of distaste that he has for the cigarette-smoking man, but more importantly for the cigarette-smoking man's kind of methods, where you get a sense that he doesn't really enjoy that aspect of what he's doing, that aspect of what he has to do. That said, I would note that the Well-Manicured Man is actually, as far as syndicate assassins go, pretty good. Like, he's got a pretty good hit rate. Like,
efficient.
On his first day, he's got about a 50-50 hit rate. He's told to kill 2 people. He kills one of them straight away and stuffs them in a trunk. That's a higher, greater success rate than I think the cigarette-smoking man has. At least going off Anasazi, The Blessing Way in Paperclip, where the cigarette-smoking man can't seem to hit the broadside of a barn. Was it, there's no problem you can't solve by just throwing more bullets at it, I think is a suggestion the Well-Manicured Man offers at one point. And he can't even bother to kill the assassins properly at the end of that story. So, let's credit where credit's due. The Well-Manicured Man, he's pretty good at what he's doing. But I think that there is something... You're entirely right about this feeling like a logical endpoint for the character, because his hands are as dirty as they are ever going to get. And I think that, to be honest, we might talk, maybe in a minute down the line about, the Well-Manicured Man's final moments, as it were, and the particulars of how and why he chooses to do the things that he does and goes the direction that he does in terms of, like, style, in terms of kind of, like, more, showmanship and kind of, a flamboyancy sort of approach to kind of, like, his going out in style, going out in a blaze of glory, quite literally. But I think that in terms of as an arc, the idea that, this character who has largely defined himself in opposition to the cigarette-smoking man, and more particularly in opposition to the methods of the cigarette-smoking man, who, like, even back in Paperclip, when he was talking to Victor Klemper, gave this impression of almost being sullied by having to actually, like, talk and vocalize his connection to a Nazi. Having him murder somebody in an alleyway and shove him into a trunk kind of represents basically the nadir. That's the point at which, in his own eyes, he's probably past redemption. He's kind of sullied and soiled. He might as well be dead. He talks about how he's doing this for his kids, and, when he's told Mulder his life might as well be over or forfeit. And again, not speaking metaphorically, talking quite literally, but there's a sense in which, for the character, the point at which he has been used as an instrument so directly as he is here, a point at which he has literally taken somebody's life, this innocent man's life, basically, because Kurzweil is innocent. He's an innocent man, innocent bystander. That's the point at which he's past the point of redemption. That's the point at which there's nowhere else he can go, and there's really no point at which he can struggle. And again, you could argue that in a broader sense, the show doesn't necessarily earn the departure of the Well-Manicured Man here, in the sense that, you could make an argument that the Well-Manicured Man would probably maybe have been more useful to keep around as an element within the mythology, within the conspiracy, to have him continue to play off the cigarette-smoking man, because once you remove the Well-Manicured Man, And once you realize that Armin Muller-Stahl is not coming back to do weekly guest appearances on The X-Files, and when you realize that you've already taken away Marita Covarrubias, and you've already taken away, Alex Krycek is kind of, is the Well-Manicured Man's driver. So what the hell is he going to do when the Well-Manicured Man's gone? So, like, when you take away the Well-Manicured Man, there's a fair criticism that you remove a lot of what makes the mythology and the syndicate and the conspiracy distinct, because you basically reduce it down to the cigarette-smoking man and the three elders. And, I love the three elders. I think the three elders are great, but they don't have any real sense of distinctive personality or frisson with one another or with the cigarette-smoking man. I think that, like, as much as I love the first elder and the sense in which he's like Marlon Brando meets Deep Throat, I think that, when you compare his scenes with, say, the cigarette-smoking man in Redux 2, with, say, the Well-Manicured Man shouting at the cigarette-smoking man, in their club in, like, Paperclip and The Blessing Way, there's no question which of those is more compelling and which of those you want more of. So I understand kind of why, there's a sense of having reached a point where the character is finished and the character needs to go. And being honest, looking at The X-Files, one of the criticisms of the show is that it traditionally keeps around characters longer than it needs to. There are several characters, particularly in the mythology, that perhaps last several seasons longer than is necessary or is justified. And I say that as somebody who absolutely adores those characters in particular. So I think that maybe there is a sense in which, removing the Well-Manicured Man now makes sense because, well, he's still popular and he's still cool and he's still interesting, and therefore his death actually matters and feels important, and he doesn't have a chance to deteriorate or go downhill. And there's also a sense in which, you wonder when Carter was writing this. Like, again, part of me wonders in terms of, like, the writing and structuring of Fight the Future versus kind of the mythology. We've talked a bit, I think, on our earlier minutes about how there's an interesting tension between Carter writing the fifth season, The X-Files, like knowing that he has to connect it to Fight the Future, but also writing elements that kind of sprawl beyond or kind of leapfrog over Fight the Future. So elements like, say, Spender and like Foley, who necessarily don't fit within the movie, but clearly line up what he wants to do in the sixth season, and so kind of jump over it. And again, this sense of, like, when he was writing Fight the Future, did Carter know or expect that he would be winding down the mythology halfway through the sixth season? At what point did he decide that he was going to wrap this up? And kind of like, so in what sense does the Well-Manicured Man's death kind of fix or fit in this picture, in that sense? Like, because being honest, as much as we miss the Well-Manicured Man bouncing off the cigarette-smoking man, the conspiracy of the mythology largely wraps up in the sixth season, and so as a result, you don't necessarily miss it as much as you would if the show dragged on and on and on. But again, you kind of have that weird thing where when the mythology drags on and on and on, and when it kind of goes through the zombie stage in, say, the 7th, 8th, and 9th seasons, what you miss is you miss the personalities. You miss the sense of characters who have clearly defined relationships with one another within this structure. You miss the sense of, the mythology being driven by interesting people. Like, the 8th season mythology is interesting with the super soldiers, but there's nothing in the 8th season that is as interesting as the Well-Manicured Man and the cigarette-smoking man bickering with one another, or sniping at one another, or bantering with one another. And it feels like a bit of a loss in that sense, in a sense of kind of killing off the Well-Manicured Man here. Although, again, and part of me wonders if this is another example of Fight the Future understanding that it's a blockbuster, that it's understanding that it's kind of like for broad audiences. And so understanding that there are certain expectations when you are doing a quote unquote event story. And one of those expectations is that characters that you care about will be placed in jeopardy and will die. And so there has to be a sense of weight and consequence. And so is the Well-Manicured Man in Fight the Future a blood sacrifice who serves to communicate to the fan base, at least, who have had an attachment to this character dating back to his first appearance in The Blessing Way, and who have maybe grown fond of him as I have over the course of the 4th and 5th seasons as well, that this is like, oh crap, things are really getting real here. The stakes are really high. There's actually something in play. And so, like, killing him off kind of is a gesture to that, or an understanding that this Fight the Future is a special story with heightened stakes, and so we need to take it more seriously. And killing off the Well-Manicured Man, or signaling that this is the end of his arc, is a way of kind of saying, oh, this stakes just got real here. I kind of wonder if that's the case as well.
I mean, I agree with a lot of what you've said there. I mean, the thing about Fight the Future for me in that regard, I look at it from the other point of view. We're talking about, say, Well-Manicured Man, Cigarette Smoking Man having the conversation in Tunguska and Terma with the affair and stuff like that we've mentioned before. I can't imagine the First Elder being of high profile enough to play Well-Manicured Man's role. And I think that you said the blood sacrifice thing is right, that you need a supporting character that the stakes will get pushed along. We need that outsider. It's not going to be Cigarette Smoking Man, because Cigarette Smoking Man is meant to be the villain of the piece, but obviously Strughold has kind of taken that aspect of it, even though Well-Manicured Man seems to sit within that, but doesn't quite fit in a lot of ways, and he's slightly retooled a little bit for this film. But I can't imagine the First Elder. I can't remember the second. I can imagine the Second Elder having this gravitas of what John Neville can bring to the character, to be able to push this film in this direction, to have the plot being driven forward by Well-Manicured Man. The fact that we do have a bit of an arc for him in this form, that there has to be that story built in. And I think having the Deana Foley and I keep saying Chris Spender, I need to stop that. Jeffrey Spender, as I say, leapfrogging over the top of that, and as I say, the mythology winding down to a degree. And you're right, absolutely right. If there'd been more of an ensemble, like of Marita and Krychek being a bit more involved at this point, and it's been written slightly differently, then you could have had someone else in it, or you could have had more pressure on the fact that you might necessarily need a Well-Manicured Man further on. But I do think it was his time, and he came into prevalence in like the Patient X and the Black, where he became a vocal element of the resistance with regards to the rebels in that story that we talked about back then. And I know that was written obviously after Fight the Future, so that in some ways that helped the fact that we were bringing him more into focus, even though he was in obviously season 4. He started to develop into more of a character. But he's got that stature in the X-Files lore that I don't think it could have been done differently in that way. And I think, as you say, that this story explicitly tells us, Well-Manicured Man explicitly tells us what the mythology is. And for him to go out in that realm as well, the fact that he's told Mulder exactly what's happened, and then we pick that up in the beginning, and it becomes a completely different show at that point, I think really attests to what Well-Manicured Man does for the story. And then obviously the mythology dropping down at that point. And I agree that, as much as I like season 8, I know you love season 8 as well, that you don't have that. You have, it's definitely more propulsive in season 8, and has a different feel to it. Has more, like No Roar and
love No Roar. It's a great name.
No Roar. Wait till we get to season 8. Can't wait for season 8. But you get that kind of more buddy thing, ex-Marine kind of story. And yes, they try and pull that a little bit more in that way. But in retrospect, this is the right time for him to go.
No, I think it is, and I think it's a high note, and I think it gives Neville a lot to play. Again, Neville, you could argue gets the short end of the stick here, where it's just like, all right, you are going to get the 3 minutes of the movie where you explain in great detail what is going on for audience members who are primarily waiting to see if Mulder and Scully will kiss. That is your job here. That is your character. Yes. Get in there, John. And he really, really, really does. He presents this kind of character in, I think over the total we've talked about maybe 11 minutes of screen time featuring him. And again, he manages to create this sense of tragedy, this grand tragedy of the character, which is remarkable. It's a fantastic supporting performance. And again, it's a hell of a high note for him to go on, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. And we're going to get into that in the next minute. But just before we finish this one, because obviously we're jumping slightly ahead of schedule, the minute says, "For the sake of my own children." There's only like 4 lines in this minute, to be fair.
And somehow we've been talking for nearly half an hour.
Yeah, exactly. But then Mulder gets a bit tired, doesn't he? His exposition gets a bit like, right, okay, I've, I want to know the truth, but I'm not quite sure if I do want to know it anymore. Yeah. I've got what I need. I've got where I need to go. Do I really want to talk about this anymore?
You're really kind of dragging the pacing down here. Really slowing the pacing down.
Where's Dr. Kurtzweil? No response. I'd like to get out of the car now. No response.
I love
Stop the car.
I love the petulance of it. I love again, this sense of Mulder as the entire world revolves around him. It's like, I would really like to get out now. This is about me. Have you thought about me? I know you've been talking about your kids. I know you've been talking about this gigantic alien conspiracy to enslave and destroy mankind. But did you stop and think about me? I want to get out. I want you to stop the car.
I've got someone at work, I won't go into any detail whatsoever, but who starts off a conversation and then you start talking to them about that conversation and within 30 seconds they'll walk off because they get bored of it. So I could totally see that happening. And Mulder, as you say, Mulder's very much, it's all about me. What about me? What about me? And there's other things, and he does that throughout the show.
And to be fair, like he has had a tough day today. Like let's be fair, it has been a bit of a tough day for Mulder. He is
wearing the lone gunman's clothes at the end of the day as well. He's wearing tight-fitting clothes as well. That can't be comfortable.
Yeah. I mean, the well-manicured man should have at least kind of asked if he wanted to get Kurtzfeld clothes at the back. Kurtzfeld looked like he had a much better fit for Duchovny, to be fair.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Don't want me to get that other thing. But mind you, he's asking where he is, isn't he, at this moment? He doesn't actually know where Kurzweil is at this point.
Part of me wonders, though, so what happens when, and again, never mind, we'll discuss in the next minute, because I have lots of questions coming out of this. But we'll get into, what happens after this sequence for anybody who's not Mulder.
Okay. I do want to say something that I was supposed to say yesterday, and I'll say it now, though. In that extra minute, the well-manicured man does say to Mulder, with the thing that you've seen, referring to the Jiffy Pop Poppers, how does well-manicured man know that was him there?
Yeah.
Because he actually physically says, like, the things you've seen.
Yeah. You know the things you've seen.
Anyway, and then what another classic well-manicured line comes up after he says, stop the car, he goes, driver!
Yeah, we'll talk about the driver in a moment as well, I think we've been building this. We've been building this up for about a week. We're going to talk about the driver.
Exactly. So it says, the men I work with will stop at nothing to clear the way for what they believe is their stake in the inevitable future. And then he pulls the gun out, and then Mulder's look on his face is kind of, like we said earlier in this episode, pulls the face and is like, oh, I'm a bit scared now. And that wraps up the minute.
Kurt, I feel like you should do the audio description. They should have a special feature where it's just you narrating Fight the Future. It's not an audio commentary. It's not like Inside. It's just like, you're describing how Mulder's reacting. Duchovny's doing his, oh, I'm scared now face. John Neville is doing I'm acting intensely.
Panic face.
Yeah. Duchovny is, Neville's acting intensely. The driver is furrowing his brow.
Mulder pulls a panic face. So that wraps up the latest Fight the Future minute. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's been a fantastic few minutes so far. Thanks, Darren. You'll be back for minute 85. The upholstery is already going to be ruined next minute.
What are you doing?
Oh, exactly. I'm going to ruin the upholstery. And the famous X-Files tagline comes up again, which is, of course, trust no one, Mr. Mulder.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Life's milestones.
Whenever it was that there was that census where there was the campaign to try and get everybody to say that their religion was Jedi.
Oh, I remember it well. I think I did put Jedi, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I was adamant that I really wanted to put that down because it aligns a lot more with my beliefs than anything else. Star Wars has always been there for me. But yeah, that's when my mum was saying, no, we had you christened, and I ended up losing that one. And then when I lived on my own for a later census, I just, by that point, just put non-religious.
I'm in a band podcast.
Flaming Lips did a gig and they were all in bubbles. So the whole band, them big bubbles you get that you can play football in? The whole band were in them and all the people in the crowd were in one of them.
I'd go to the gig with a pin and fucking ruin everyone's evening.
You need a big pin.
Then you have to get out of your bubble first with your pin. They're going to see you.
But you have a bubble with a pin on it. Or what, you're like a sea urchin just going around causing chaos.
Hey, rolling around.
Could you have a fag enough?
I suppose you could get your own bubble, innit?
Frame to frame.
So Sean, have you got anything further you wanted to say on the two films that we've looked at this week?
I think they're both overlooked gems, and anyone who hasn't seen them needs to go and check them out pronto. Enough said.
I agree with you. We could have also called the theme for this week "Nerdy White Guy Tries to Find Love."
But are you having a go at me there?
No, I'm just saying
because I bore my heart when talking about the way back. I thought you were having a pop at me there.
No, absolutely not. I'm just saying that's what we could have called the theme for this week.
I mean, we could have done. It could have been like, podcaster recalls painful memory of riding bike in front of girl.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.